Good evening, and welcome to Direct Impact Broadcasting, the station of growth and transformation. Affiliate of Creative Broadcasting presents Leadership Tidbits with Coach T. Wilson, with your host, Tywauna Wilson, as she welcomes her guest to the studio.
Welcome to Leadership Tidbits with Coach T. Wilson. I am your host, Tywauna Wilson. A little bit about myself. I am your award-winning leadership maven, medical laboratory scientist by background, best-selling author, owner and chief leadership coach at Trendy Elite Coaching and Consulting Services, executive director with the John Maxwell team, Maxwell DISC certified consultant, Send Out Cards referral partner, and co-owner of Direct Impact Broadcasting radio station. Before we bring on my special guest, I want to thank my March radio show sponsor, Mr. Martinez Wilson of 2nd Samuel Transport, where they make sure you get all of your Amazon packages delivered on time, located in Cincinnati, Ohio. Also, thank you to my media mentors, Miss Ashley Little and Miss Kimberly McLemore of Talk Radio TV Network, LLP. Today we have my special guest and big sister, Miss Mardia Shands. Mardia Shands is the Executive Director for Partners for a Competitive Workforce, which is a regional collaborative that leads the efforts to grow the skills of the regional workforce and create a talent pipeline to meet employers' needs for labor. Ms. Shands has more than 20 years of human resources and workforce development experience across multiple industries, including manufacturing, supply chain, healthcare, construction, and IT. Her career has spanned from multinational global corporations to small not-for-profits across North America and Africa. She is an Aspen Institute Job Quality Fellow and is a member of Class 39 of Leadership Cincinnati. She has been recognized by the Cincinnati Business Courier as a 40 under 40 business leader and the YWCA of Greater Cincinnati as a rising star. She is the immediate past chair of the Workforce Investment Board of Butler, Warren, and Clermont counties, where she was recognized as a regional expert in workforce development issues and solutions. Ms. Shands also serves on the board of directors for the YWCA of Dayton and Lifespan. Mardia earned a bachelor's degree in economics from the University of Cincinnati and a master's degree in labor and employment relations, also from the University of Cincinnati. She holds the Senior Professional in Human Resources designation from the Human Resources Certification Institute and the Senior Certified Professional Certificate from the Society of Human Resources Management. Greetings, Mardia. How are you doing this evening?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you, Coach T. You know, it's funny. Every time I hear that bio being read, I'm looking around the room and thinking, who are we talking about? Who is that person? Okay. Well, thank you.
Thank you for joining us this evening and giving the listener audience all of your expertise. So let's jump right in. Tell the listeners about your journey to leadership, and how did you get to where you are today?
Sure. So my journey to leadership, you know, I suppose I've always been on a journey, and will always continue to be on a journey. And my journey to leadership has always been in place and started, I would say, as a young woman. And as a young woman in junior high school, throughout high school and undergrad and into grad school. And as I look at my career, what I would say is probably knowing in high school that I wanted to go to college. I've always had it in mind, you know, without my parents telling me that I was going to go on to higher education. I knew I was going to go to college, and just always had that as an aspiration. And throughout just pursuing my academics, I've changed major a number of times. I started off, of all things, as a fashion design major, and just a general studies major, and then ultimately settled on economics. And I knew I didn't want just a general business degree, and so I wanted to specialize in something, and so I started looking at economics, and in particular, labor economics. And so when I graduated with a degree in economics, I went out into the workplace and looked at specifically the Chamber of Commerce. And as I worked in the Chamber of Commerce, I was looking at labor economics from the perspective of companies that wanted to relocate to the greater Cincinnati area. And the work that I was doing at the time was just general administrative work in pulling data together for companies to understand how they were coming into the area and was there available labor to support their business operations. And so I started to get interested in that work and what are the dynamics of looking at the labor market. And that led to a career in HR, believe it or not, because I wanted to see on the other side of it, okay, who is the person that's collecting that information and why are they collecting that information? And that information is while it's going to finance so that finance can understand, okay, what is the cost really is going into HR, because HR is the person, the people in the organization that's looking at your labor costs and so forth. And so that led to a career into human resources, and then I just gradually climbed the ladder, and I am where I am today, working in workforce and labor and all those wonderful things. So that's kind of has been my path and, along the journey of where I am today.
Wow, that's awesome. It's always nice to hear because sometimes we tell our young people go in with a plan, and sometimes they do, and it's nice to hear when you talk to working professionals that like, well, I went in with one thing in mind. I thought I was going to go into fashion, and then I changed my mind and did general studies and then went into economics. So that was nice to hear, especially for our young people that might not have it figured out.
That's right. And, so you're absolutely right. You don't have to have it figured out. I knew I wanted to go to school. I knew that for sure. And you couldn't tell me that I was not going to be on the runways of Paris and I wasn't going to be a fashion designer. And I stuck with it, too. 3 years into the program, I started thinking, okay, at some point I'm going to have to feed myself here. And so this fashion design thing is not, I don't know where we're going with this, but I hadn't seen my first runway yet, even at the College of Design, Architecture, Art, and Planning at UC. So I'm thinking, okay, you need a paycheck, girl, so get it together and try to figure out where this paycheck is coming from. And that's how I was able to at least sit in general studies for a couple of semesters and then ultimately sat in economics. And that's how my career blossomed from there.
That's funny. I've never heard that story about you starting off in fashion design, but it all makes sense. Those who know you and have seen you in the boardroom and have seen you working, you were definitely, as the young people say, slaying in the boardroom with your fashionable attire. So that's funny. It all comes together. So you have such a vast experience in human resources and workforce development across multiple industries. How are you able to transition and be successful in industries that seem totally unrelated?
Sure. And yes, I absolutely have been in a wide variety of industries, from retail to hospitality to manufacturing and construction. And what at the core of all of it is human resources, and the common word in all of that is human. And people are people, and so people are people across industries. And to be able to transfer my skills across those different industries, the common denominator in all of those industries are the people. And so within any organization, you're going to have people who run your operations and look at the commonalities in all of that. And so people come to work ultimately to earn a living. There are different motivators in people across the industry. However, they come to earn a living. People come to work for the dignity of work. Some people come to work, whatever that thing is that they're trying to achieve or aspire to in their jobs. there are certain commonalities that ring true and consistent across industries. And so as an HR professional, I'm able to see what those similarities are, and I'm able to capitalize on what people bring to the workplace and help translate that into whatever objectives that whatever organization in whatever industry is striving to achieve. So that's how I'm able to translate the human capital across different industries.
Awesome. And what about strengths? What strengths do you feel were necessary for you to be able to cross those lines of manufacturing and healthcare and IT?
Sure. And I'm gonna tell you, this is a tough gig. It's not easy. So you have to. I will tell you, one of my strengths is prayer. Listen, prayer every morning. Get up and Lord, what do you have for me today to do today? And let me put my armor on and get out here. So I will say, being able to persevere and be resilient, and being agile and just flexible and adaptable. Those are skills I think that are my strengths, and that allows me to be able to go into most situations and be able to find my way through that, because there are days that are very tough, especially when you're dealing with people, because people come into work with all kinds of stuff going on. And then, us too as individuals and I as a person, I come into work with all my stuff as well. And so I have to put all of that aside and work with the people for whom I'm responsible for looking out for, and for the businesses that I have that I'm responsible for managing their human resources. And so, just resilience, perseverance, agility, adaptability, flexibility are some of my skills, strong skills.
And you're right. People are people, but people are different. And so I've definitely had to learn that while you can get all the tips and tricks and all of that, you become a coach, a mentor, a counselor. I mean, you become it all for your teams.
Yeah, I agree. I 100% agree. Yes.
Employers are struggling with growing the skills of their teams and growing their talent pipeline to meet current and future needs. What work are you doing in this space to help employers realize their most precious asset is their people? Employers talk about it. We know that we need to invest in our people, and our people are our most precious asset, and they say that, and they have these values. But sometimes it doesn't come out as though they're investing in their people and they think their people are the most precious asset. So what work are you doing in this space?
I know, right? So that is that's an excellent question, and it's a great question that we in I guess the industry that I'm in with regard to workforce development have been just working with and just toiling with and working around with. And so the space that I occupy with regard to how do we get employers to recognize that it's more than words when you say, your people are your number one asset in your organization, or people are your competitive advantage, and people are what make your organization special. So, Coach T, I'm gonna kind of bounce a couple of things off of you. How often have you been in organizations where you do hear those things, right? Organizations say my people are the most important thing to me, and then you hear the reputation of that company. Have you heard that as well too?
I've heard it quite a lot, and I've been with various organizations, and I've heard it, but it comes out loud and clear, especially in employee engagement surveys, that there's a mismatch.
Right. So, same thing. As an HR professional, some of the things that we would do too is, give employees the annual engagements survey and so forth, and we would get the score back. And, we would take a look at the scores, put an action plan together with the aim of improving those scores. And then, theoretically, if the scores are improved, then that means that the employees are more satisfied or more engaged and so forth. Well, the way that looks like today and more recently, the way that the workforce is moving, we have a workforce now that's so dynamic. You've got really 4 generations working in today's workforce. You've got boomers, you've got Gen X, you've got Gen Y, the millennials, and then you've got Gen Z, who are an incredible group of young people. And with all of these folks in the workforce now, you've got a group of people who, with the boomers are like, you know what, you come to work, they pay you, you do your job, and that's that for that. You've got Gen Z who's like, I'm here for maybe the afternoon, and if I don't like what y'all talking about today, I may leave in the middle of the shift. So that's what you're dealing with, everything in between that. And so what employers are now understanding or have come to realize is that some of the employees, Gen Z, they don't care anything about you or your job. They're there to get that paycheck, earn that money for however long and however much they need. And it could be $50 for their Netflix bill. And the minute they earn that $50, they may or may not stay for the day, and they're out of there. And so if you are an employer who's interested in having a workforce, a top-notch workforce that you want committed to your organization, you're going to do whatever is necessary to attract and to retain that workforce. And the employees are like, I'll take it or leave it. And most often they're leaving it if you don't have a work environment that's conducive to what it is that they want. And what do they want? They want flexible scheduling. They want help paying off their student loans. They want help with their child care issues. They want to be able to go back to school, and they want you to pay for it in advance. They do not want tuition reimbursement. They want tuition prepayment. They want to be able to have a healthy meal on the company premises. They want Uber services. And so there's a whole myriad of things that employees are now demanding from their employers. And employers are understanding that in order to be a top competitor in terms of attracting and retaining talent, they're going to have to meet those demands because that's what the labor market is now saying it needs and it wants. And so what I'm trying to do now is get employers, to recognize that that's the way that the labor market is now behaving, and trying to get employers to understand that if they don't change the paradigm and understand that that's how the labor market is behaving, they're going to be left to the side and not able to fill their open positions, and people are just going to move on to those employers who offer those types of benefits. So that's what I'm doing in that space in terms of helping employers attract and retain top talent.
That's excellent. That's excellent points. I mean, I see it all the time where employers want to attract that top talent, and they may be able to do that. However, the retention starts to be an issue when they are not investing in their employees. They're not offering leadership training. They're not offering coaching. They're not offering those things that keep those employees being the best. And what happens is at some point, after they feel that their talents are not being groomed and not being poured into, then they move on to another employer. And unfortunately, with so many people retiring at this point, we're finding, and especially in healthcare and in laboratory medicine, is that there's a huge shift in need for leadership. And we're struggling to find those qualified candidates in that we do have some old school thinking and not developing that talent. So that's awesome work that you were doing in that space.
Absolutely. And here's the thing, interestingly enough, leadership comes in all forms. Leadership is not derived through a title that somebody bestowed on you, and leadership isn't necessarily derived because of age. Leadership can come, again, in all different forms, and you can have someone on the team who is a natural leader and somebody who people coalesce around and will follow because that person has wisdom, that person has vision, that person has experience, and people just naturally gravitate to that individual and will follow that individual. And so I think sometimes we tend to look at a person and think, oh, well, that person's too young, or that person doesn't have the right pedigree, whatever it is that we ascribe to people to call them leaders and so forth. But a leader, in my definition, if people are willing to follow that person, they're a leader. If that person is able to get people to understand, to see, if that person can cast a vision and get other people to buy into that vision and can move people along a continuum, that person, in my definition, is a leader. And so leadership presents itself in a lot of different forms. And people, I think, sometimes we can be a little short-sighted in who we decide is a leader. So I just think that we should open up our definition a little bit more.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm happy you said that, and that's the reason why I started this show, is because when people think about leaders and leadership, sometimes they equate it to a title. And so I want the listening audience to know that leaders come in all packages, different backgrounds, different experiences, doing different things. And as I work with the young people, a lot of times they don't see themselves as leaders. What they see as being a leader is somebody that's out being the voice of the company, being that person you see on TV. And so the more we can change our verbiage around leadership, and are we leaders? We're all leaders. We need to claim that. Mm-hmm. So that was an excellent point that you made. So, Mardia, we know that with success comes failure. It's important that our listening audience know that the journey to leadership is not all roses and good times, as what they may see, as the end result. So tell us about one of your biggest failures and the learning lesson that you gained from it.
Sure, absolutely. I would say it's not necessarily one point or a moment in time. I would say, my biggest failure overall, just through my leadership journey, is that I didn't give myself enough time to enjoy certain points along my journey, and I didn't give myself enough time to mature in certain points along my journey. I was so driven, and I have been so driven and so goal-oriented along my leadership journey and just within my career that I moved a lot sooner than I should have in some of my roles, and I moved rather quickly in some of my roles, and I didn't give myself enough time to enjoy the role, and B, enough time to mature in the role. And I think I would have done myself a better service had I done that. There are two roles in particular. One was with a manufacturing organization, and in hindsight, looking back at that role in that organization, I would have enjoyed myself a little bit more had I given myself an opportunity to stay and mature in that role, and I would have learned a lot with some really good people had I given myself an opportunity to stay in that role a lot longer. I just knowing that industry and what is capable of doing and what it is doing today. Had I stayed in that role, I would have really learned some really solid HR practices and so forth. And there's another role that I was in, and that one was in the retail space. Retail is an interesting industry. It's got the craziest schedule in the world, and I hated that. But talk about being upfront and personal with people. That just really gave you a lot of just one-on-one exposure to people and the craziness that is people. And so, again, just really wish that I wouldn't have been as goal-oriented as I've been throughout my career. So I think that was a failure in that I didn't recognize it at the time. So that and you know, the older you get, you kind of realize, okay, you know, had I to do it all over again, this is what I would do. But young people and people who are moving through their career and those who are goal-oriented, slow down. It's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. It's going to be here, and give yourself time. It'll be here, and, you know, what's for you is for you. So just slow your roll. You'll be all right.
That is great advice. Guilty. Young people, slow your roll. Guilty.
I know. We look at our career and we're like, okay, by the time I'm 25, I'm gonna do this, and by the time I'm 30, okay, you know. And I mean, I'm one with a check box. Okay, I have a list, and I'm like, okay, by the time I'm 40, I would have done this, you know. And I'm over here checking the boxes. And then you turn around, you're like, wait a minute, but I missed half the party. What happened? You know, slow down. Come back here, Sparky, okay?
Yes, I'm happy you mentioned that, because you're right, especially when you are so driven and are so goal-oriented, that you do. I mean, sometimes you move quickly. You know, and I can think back, not too many moves that was like, I probably shouldn't have made that move so fast. But I can think of, you know, one where I got my first management experience, and after almost 5 years, I did move on to something else. But, you know, sometimes I think that maybe I should have not moved so quickly. But again, hindsight is 20/20.
Right.
But you're right. That's definitely a learning lesson.
Right. It is. And you know what's interesting too is, you know, you've got your colleagues that you're so-called competing with, and as they move in their careers too, you know, and this is human nature. It's like you're in this make-believe race, and that's exactly what it is, audience. It's a make-believe race. You're thinking, okay, well, my colleague just got promoted to this, and they're moving their career along this line. So stay in your lane and worry about what it is that you're doing, okay? Enjoy your career and your journey, and focus on your journey, because what's for you is for you. And don't worry about what this person over here is doing. And I know, easier said than done. Trust me, you'll be fine. Your journey is going to be as different as you are different. And enjoy it. Take your time and relish in it and so forth. And you'll get to where it is that you're supposed to be. Just don't look to the left and don't look to the right, and don't be worried about what this person over here is doing. And, you know, they got this award and they you know, achieve this accomplishment and whatnot. That all of that is foolishness, and all you're doing is just stressing yourself out. So just enjoy the ride and enjoy the journey.
Good point. From frontline manager to various senior executive roles that you've held, I'm sure there's been a lot of tough decisions that you've had to make. Some you agree with, and others you probably didn't.
Yes.
Can you share with us one of these tough decisions that you had to make and the result of that decision?
Sure. And in HR, it's very that world is as complex as it gets with regard to being in a position of making decisions that you personally may not agree with, and your organization may, take a position that you just don't agree with, and you have to make a call. I had an employer where we had to make a decision about whether or not we were going to offer a certain benefit. And I thought it was in the employees and the company's best interest if we offered a certain benefit. And having done the legwork behind it in terms of was it in the company's best interest, in the employee's best interest, from just a cost perspective, from an attraction and retention perspective, well-being, all of the analysis around it, I believed that the company needed to provide that particular benefit. And the company decided they should not. And I, presented a business case for this is why I think we need to proceed in this direction and why we need to pursue this. And I could not get overall support for that decision. I enlisted allies in the organization who I, knew would go before the powers that be. And I got, again, information to validate the position that I was taking, justify the position I was taking, and I just could not get the support that I needed. And this is something that I personally thought that we needed to be doing. And it didn't go against anything, against the company, and they just decided that they didn't want to do it. And at the end of the day, what you can do is what you can do, and that's all you can do. And they decided, nope, not going to offer this, and we didn't offer it. And I just was stunned that, wow, okay, then I'll do this. And at the end of the day, it kind of was what it was. And I just was so disappointed. But, disappointments are part of life and part of the job, and it just was what it was. And I'm still kind of sitting here like, wow, they didn't do it. And, okay. So yeah, you make hard calls, and you just kind of let it be what it is. So, yeah.
Right, and it's almost like it's not almost, it is. The higher you climb on that ladder, the more difficult decisions you'll have to make, and there will be times that you don't agree with that decision, but you still have to come to a consensus, agree to disagree for the sake of the business operations. So it happens all of the time. People want a seat at the table, but I don't know that they always know what having a seat at the table really means.
Indeed. I 100% agree with that. And then too, that said, there are times now where there's business decisions that need to be made, and then there's also personal decision and things that come against or will come at you from a personal integrity and personal credibility and personal stance, where there's a decision that needs to be made that may come in conflict with that. And so what do you then do in cases like that? So I will say this. I got a bit of advice from a very wise person who said to me very early in my career and along my journey as a young woman, who said to me, her words were, know what your line is, what your limit, what your boundaries are in advance so that you know you will not cross them. You need to have that defined already. And that way, if you ever find yourself in a situation like that, you won't have to make the call. You already know this is something that I absolutely will not do, not trying to do, ain't going to do it, don't even ask. And so have that already pre-established, predetermined, and, if the situation comes up, you know how to walk away. And, that will be that for that. And so fortunately, I, took that advice. I know what my boundaries, where my lines are. I know what I will and will not do. And what's interesting is because I already have that defined, I go into, relationships, organizations, partnerships, and so forth, speaking that to my audience and to my colleagues and so forth and so on. And so I don't get put into situations where people are asking me to do things that go against my personal integrity and credibility and so forth. And the people who are misguided enough to ask me, I certainly know my voice and can, very clearly say, no, I won't be doing that. No.
Well, that's good advice. That has come up numerous times of really knowing where you stand. And I know some people come in conflict with that because they may not be clear on their core values or where they stand. And then during those times where you have to, you come up against these decisions or those issues, it's hard to think at a time when you don't already know where you stand at.
Mm-hmm.
So
you're absolutely right with regard to core values. You have to know what your core values are. Who you are, what you stand for, what you believe in. Those things have to be just the foundation of who you are as a person, how you deal with other people in situations, and those are things that I think most of us, and I can't speak for everybody, which is why I'm saying most of us. I think most of us have to have settled in us, before we really start to fly out there, on our leadership journeys. I think you have to have that very well defined because people will try you. People will try you. Yes, they will try you. They will test you. They will poke at you, and they will prod you. And you need to be able to hold your own and hold your ground in terms of, no, I'm not doing that. Don't ask me to do that. These are my core values and my core principles, and what you're asking me to do goes against them. And no, I'm not doing that. The other thing too, that doesn't. It's not the same thing as saying that you're not open to new ideas, you're receptive to diversity of thought or diversity of experiences and background and so forth. I absolutely am, and I would hope that people are. However, there are some fundamental truths that I hold to that in a business setting I can't stray away from what I know to be honest and what I know to be morally right and what I know to be fair and so forth. And, I know what my lines are, Mardia's lines, and so I don't cross those because the first time you do it is the first time you do it, and then you can't pull that back.
Right. Awesome. That's very good advice. Mardia, I see you led operations in Africa, and that sounds really cool. So in today's work, it sounds really cool. You were able to lead operations in your home, right, in Liberia.
So, West Africa.
In today's workplace, global leadership is becoming more common. Tell us about your work in Africa and if that leadership experience was any different than your leadership experience here in the United States.
Yes. So yes, it was absolutely indeed different. It was fun. It was scary. It was okay. Now this is interesting. So, as a brown girl in America, it is very different being a brown girl in Africa, where everybody are brown girls and brown people. That was amazing. I just felt like the world had tipped into the right direction, and everybody was okay, and everything was all right again. So I'm going to leave that right there. Okay. And so working in Africa was amazing because some of the things that I noticed were the value system was different in terms of work hours. For example, they actually worked like 8:30 to 5. They took an hour lunch, and when they went to lunch, people went to lunch. It was like we stopped working. Nobody. People went home for lunch. They didn't sit at their desk and eat, and sit at the computer. And I'm like, okay, I'm liking this. Let me run back to my apartment and go to lunch. And things like that. And when you were off, you were off. You didn't sit around with your computer. Now I did because, here I am being the pseudo-American chick still on her phone and her laptop. So that was craziness, but I heard Lee got out of it because everybody else would go to the beach when they were off work. So, but it was, their value system was different in that work is work, play is play, and, the two shall not mix. And I just thought that was so refreshing. The other thing, too, is labor laws were very different. They were very pro-employee in that you couldn't just write people up for, any infraction at the job. If somebody was tardy because their child was sick, gee, imagine that. I'm late to work because my child is sick. Well, the child is sick. That's something totally out of my control. Where in this country, if, we look at it and say, okay, your child is sick, you need to have alternate arrangements, which is, cause for great debate nowadays in American labor and so forth. But so those are some of the things that I noticed. One of the things that I noticed that was very unique, we had a situation where we were doing a layoff of some of the staff, and we had gone through the whole process. We gave people their severance checks, and everybody had their packets and so forth, and we were like, okay, we're done, and people wouldn't leave. And I was like, okay, why are they still here? And then the local HR manager who I was working with, she was like, well, you haven't given them their certificate. And I was like, what certificate? She was like, okay, the money is fine and all of that, but in Liberia, if you don't give somebody a certificate that says that they worked this particular job, let's say they were a receptionist at ABC Company for the last 3 years, they can't necessarily go and get future employment because that certificate represents the skills that they have and the experience that they have, and they need that in order to be able to go and get future employment. And I was like, what? I had no idea that was something that was needed in that country. And it was just like, something that we just don't pay any attention to was something that was extremely valuable for the workforce in Liberia. So I just learned just that little tidbit of information, while I was working there. And I was just like, imagine that. Things that you don't place any value in was something that they did. And so I thought that was pretty cool. So,
wow.
Yeah, that was my time spent in Liberia. I did a lot more than that, but, we'll talk about that maybe at a later date.
Okay, wow. Yeah, it's just always interesting to hear how different cultures do things. And, you hear a lot, especially in regards to work-life balance. And, sometimes us in the U.S. is work. You work 10 hours, come home, you're still working. And then we just as sick as we can be or want to be, but yet some of our peers across the globe are working 8 hours and, go home and enjoy their families and other things and are still just as progressive as we are, and they are just as healthy as can be. So it's just interesting to get different perspectives.
Mm-hmm. Yes, without a doubt. I mean, and it's so interesting to see a picture. Sometimes I know everybody has that typical picture of Africa or somebody in a village and so forth. No, I'm talking high-rise buildings, oceanfront high-rise, everybody with their cell phones and, their laptops and so forth. But when it's 5 o'clock, 5:30, people are shut down. At lunchtime, don't think you're getting ready to go into any store and go buy anything. No, those people are gone to lunch, just like you ought to be at lunch, sitting in your house too. So, first time I tried to go run an errand on lunch, it was like, no, everybody else is at lunch. That's where you need to be, is at lunch. I was like, okay. So I guess we get ready to sit here, and that's why I had to get into that habit. And I was like, listen, the first couple of weeks of that, I was like, now this is crazy. And they were like, no, you crazy. You need to go to lunch. I said, okay,
Too funny.
I can do this. Listen, I'm going to take a nap at lunch. That's what I'm going to do. And then come back here. Back to America, and then you're sitting at your desk eating lunch, and people are calling you and emailing you. You got to like run and hide in the broom closet just to have lunch. I'm like, this is craziness.
Right. Too funny. So, Mardia, from an HR recruiting standpoint, because I know our listeners are interested in writing down some of these nuggets, and they want to know, what kind of experience and skills do you typically look for to fill a frontline manager position as well as those senior leadership roles?
Sure. So the skills that I look for are people who are team players, and that is probably the most overused term in the dictionary in terms of what is the skill set that people look for. Team player. Can you play nice in the sandbox with everybody else? It's just that simple. And, we learn that or are supposed to learn that in kindergarten. And so that we look for that because in today's environment, again, if you recall, I said earlier, there are 4 generations in the workforce, and you have to be able to figure out how to navigate all 4 of those generations. And you've got, older people, you've got young people in the workforce, and can you navigate through all of those? If you're a supervisor, you have to be able to manage and understand the needs of all 4 of those generations. And so you have to have people on a team that spans those generations. How do you get them to cooperate collaboratively so that they can deliver whatever your goals or whatever your strategy is? And if you're the leader of that group of individuals, you have to have that skill set and then have to be able to transfer that skill set or at least cultivate that skill set within your team. So teamwork is just automatically the first one that I look for in a frontline supervisor or even in senior leadership.
Awesome. Mm-hmm. What suggestions do you have for ways people can, acquire the skill of being a team player or organization or being able to communicate effectively across all of these generations? If they feel like they are unable to get it in their role now at their employer, how best what would you encourage them to do to get those skills to be comfortable and prepared?
And you're right. You're absolutely right in terms of communications. That's another skill too that people certainly do need to be strong in as well. And if you feel like your current opportunity is not giving you the chance to acquire those skills, so I'm gonna do a shameless plug for Coach T here. You need to get you a Coach T. You need to get you a coach, whomever, but find a coach and find a mentor. And those are people who can help you acquire the skills that you need in order to be successful in your leadership journey and, on your career path and so forth. But coaches will do a couple of things for you. One of it is would give you some honest feedback about where you may have a gap in your skill set. Coaches will also be able to help you acquire those skills because in addition to giving you that feedback, they'll give you information about how to acquire those skills where they see the gaps. And in talking with you, they will be able to point out specific examples of, okay, this is where I see the gap is occurring, or these are the circumstances and situations in which I see the gap is occurring. Let me give you examples of how you can cultivate teamwork and communications and so forth. And again, mentors do the same thing. They can take you under their arms. They can give you exposure to those types of skills and so forth. And I think those are coaches and mentors are probably two of the biggest ways that I think you can help acquire those skills if you're not getting them in your current role or environment.
Excellent, excellent. You are very correct. And that's what we are able to do with those that we mentor or those that we coach. So, Mardia, how can a listener stay connected with you and support you in your efforts?
Sure. So you can get a hold of me. I am on Twitter, and my Twitter handle is @Shands Mardia, @SHANDS And so if you want to get any of my leadership tidbits, you can reach out to me on Twitter. And that's how you can hear from me.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, you've shared a lot of great wisdom with me over the years, and I definitely appreciate it. One thing you shared with me from an HR standpoint, especially as I was moving into management, that I never forgot, because I've had to do this. I've had to separate employees from organizations and introduce them back to the community. But one thing that sticks with me is that you said, if you have a choice, never separate somebody on a Friday where they have over the weekend to think about it and process it and not have anybody to talk to. And while that sounds, like maybe it's not a big deal, I think about those things because, again, if we have a traumatic event and go through that cycle, and so anytime I've had to do that, I'm like, okay, now what day do we think we're going to do this on? And anytime they ever said something close to the weekend, I'm like, if we can avoid that, let's not do that. So I thank you for that, because that has been pretty helpful, because I have seen people not take the news in a positive, in a great way. This, almost been detrimental. So thank you for sharing that with me. I put that in my leadership skill box so that I know.
Yeah,
it's important information. As you move to the top, you got to make a lot of those tough calls.
You do. I that one I learned the hard way. So yes, I'm glad you got that one in the leadership toolbox there. Yes.
Well, there's several, but that one definitely that was one of those early ones, and when I had to be involved in those separations, I just always kept that in my mind. So thank you so much, Mardia, for taking the time out of your busy schedule. I know you're busy. You were like flying around here and doing tons of great things inside your workplace and out in the community. So I thank you for giving me the opportunity to interview you today. It was definitely an honor to have you as my guest, and many blessings and much success to you on your journey.
Thank you so much. It was my privilege and pleasure to sit on the show with you and talk about my leadership journey. I really appreciate your time. Thank you.
No, thank you. So thank you, listener audience, for tuning in to tonight's show with our special guest, Miss Mardia Shands, where she shared with us, this work is hard, people. It's hard, especially as you move to the top. So you need to find whatever that inner being is or whatever that strength is to get you through so that you are able to persevere and be flexible and adaptable. Know where you stand Have that line drawn way before you have to make a decision. And make sure you find yourself a coach or a mentor. Those are people who are going to give you honest feedback. They're going to help you acquire the skills and just be honest with you and let you know where those gaps are. So if you don't have a coach or a mentor, make sure that you invest in one. All of us that's at the top or near the top or on the journey has multiple coaches and mentors in our lives. If you're interested in being a guest on the show, being a radio show sponsor, highlighting your business or event, please email dibroadcasting@TrendyEliteLLC.com. Again, that's dibroadcasting@TrendyEliteLLC.com. And please tune in next week to hear from another amazing leader. Until then, have a good evening.
Thank you, friends, for tuning in to another episode of Leadership Tidbits with Coach T. Wilson, where Tywauna speaks with leaders who share nuggets of wisdom that you can use in your personal and professional life. Follow her on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Coach T. Wilson. Connect on LinkedIn or visit www.coachtwilson.com. And remember, in life, learn as much as you can, appreciate often, and lead fearlessly.